As I mentioned in a previous video today, in the aftermath of a very rare public hearing of the failed sham Biden impeachment inquiry, an increasing number of Republican politicians are publicly throwing in the towel on impeaching the president. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bell before you go. I'd greatly appreciate it. All right, friends. Again, I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not a prophet. I don't pretend to be. I give political commentary. I give analysis. I'm formally educated in political science, but whereas a lot of others are very confident about making gambles and bets, I don't do that. So the question of whether or not and when the Biden impeachment inquiry will wrap up, I've got no idea, right? Because on the one hand, there are some signals that it's going to wrap up, that they're in the downward phase. They're wrapping things up. And then the next day, they'll signal that actually, no, they're going to keep it going during the election at the very least to try to extract some sort of political price against President Biden, even in the absence of formal substantive charges or formal substantive evidence. Okay. But with that in mind, I do want to play you some clips in which it's not even just moderate Republicans, although one clip is of a moderate Republican and the other is of a pretty far right Republican, where they seem to be throwing in the towel. They seem to be writing it off that impeachment's not going to happen. I want to start with Mike Lawler, an alleged moderate Republican from New York. He was interviewed on MSNBC's Morning Joe, and this is what he had to say.
Yesterday, the White House called for an end to the impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden. We played some sound. Some conservative media figures, including those on Fox News, also have expressed real skepticism about its future. But yesterday, Chairman Comer said he wants the president himself to come testify before the committee. Would you support that effort? Do you still back this impeachment inquiry into the president?
Look, the reason I supported the impeachment inquiry was because the White House was refusing to cooperate with certain subpoenas. As I've said repeatedly, I did not believe there was sufficient evidence for an impeachment, but that obviously Congress has oversight responsibility and should continue down that road. However, that does not mean that we should go towards impeachment. I have yet to see any evidence that would warrant the rise to impeachment.
And remember, Republicans technically have the majority, but they only have a 2-seat majority, right? Because of various resignations along the way, because the extremists have driven out the alleged moderates, the alleged institutionalists. But if the evidence was there and it was compelling, they should be able to pull off an impeachment vote. They have a 2-vote margin, right? Every Republican in Congress is politically motivated for various reasons, including the alleged moderates, to politically hurt Joe Biden. So it's not like they're squeamish. As a matter of fact, Mike Lawler, the person we just saw in the clip, he voted for the impeachment inquiry against the president. He voted to formalize it. So you had the potential to get his vote. And he's saying, even after all this, I don't think we're going to have the vote. And if we do have the vote based on what's been presented, he says he'd vote no. Again, it's not just moderate Republicans. You have far-right Republicans like Tim Burchett from Tennessee, who's basically throwing cold water on the prospect of impeaching the president.
Always call him as you see him. Would you agree that the impeachment inquiry is basically over?
We're not going to have the votes. That's clearly the case. And I don't think we ever did. I think you had a few Republicans that would have pulled out. And now that a bunch have just left us in the middle of their terms or before the end of their terms, I think it'd be very questionable whether we could get the votes. And
think about that. We're not going to have the votes. I don't think we ever had the votes. And this is from a far right. I mean, folks, I don't know how you can possibly interpret it in good faith other than this whole thing was a disaster from the very beginning. They had the margins. They had every single person incentivized to impeach President Biden. And not only do they not have the votes, they say now that they never had the votes. That's an indictment. There was also a Washington Post article. We're going to read a bit of it. Ian Sams, the White House spokesperson, that basically the liaison, the communications liaison with everything to do with Congress. He's basically one of the foremost critics of the Biden impeachment inquiry. He posted this excerpt. He said, it's quote, "My views on impeachment in general, it's a very high bar that they need to meet, and they needed to convince their colleagues that it was the right thing to do," said Representative Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania. quote, if they are declining to bring charges of articles of impeachment, I think that's the right decision. In other words, he doesn't think that there is evidence of an impeachable offense against President Biden. Now, other things from this article I want to point out. In the absence of those votes, James Comer, the Grand Inquisitor of the Biden witch hunt, and other members of the investigating committees have pivoted to the possibility of criminal referrals. Comer has threatened to make multiple criminal referrals, but it remains unclear whether lawmakers will formally accuse President Biden of a crime and what crimes they allege may have been committed. Quote, I'm not sure how we would have a criminal referral of the president yet not move forward with impeachment, said Representative Kelly Armstrong, a Republican from North Dakota. I mean, the Justice Department is never going to take that up anyway. Armstrong, who is a member of the House Judiciary Committee, added that the committee could pursue criminal referrals around violations of the FARA Act, Foreign Agents Registration Act, for several witnesses who've testified before the committee. But again, that's not against Joe Biden. That would be against witnesses and perhaps Hunter Biden, President Biden's son. But folks, again, the reason that we're talking about this is because this has been the only political initiative unveiled consistently by House Republicans since they took the majority in January 2023. The fact of the matter is there are more important issues, at least in terms of substance, than this failed sham Biden impeachment inquiry. Although impeaching the president, or potentially impeaching the president, is, in terms of domestic politics, a pretty big deal. But what makes it even more of a big deal is the fact that it's the only thing Republicans have been consistently working on. That's it. It's the least productive iteration of Congress since the Great Depression. That fact needs to be hammered again and again and again. It's an election year. You need to be aware of it. That needs to be, when you think of House Republicans, after thinking stupid, dysfunctional, chaotic, immature, then you also need to remember it's the least productive iteration of Congress because of them. Prior to them, things were rolling by pretty smoothly. When Nancy Pelosi was Speaker of the House under Donald Trump, it was more productive than this. So it's not just simply the fact that it's divided government. It's the fact that Democrats are just objectively better at maneuvering in divided government and working bipartisanly in divided government. I don't mince words here. There's no point in pretending. Democrats are objectively superior at running things. They are better negotiators with respect to government. They are better executors when it respects to government. With respect to government, they're better legislators. They're just better, which is why as we head closer to these elections, even if you're not particularly progressive, maybe you're a moderate, maybe you're a centrist, but you want a functioning government, given that government's not going anywhere. I know some libertarians be like, yeah, let's get rid of government. Government's not going anywhere. The United States federal government will go on. It will endure. So then the question is, do you want a functioning government which can use its awesome power to benefit you? Or do you want a dysfunctional government that will use its awesome power to impede and hurt you? If you want a functioning but positive government, you should vote Democrat in every damn election that you can vote on for every office. If you want a dysfunctional, harmful government, then you should probably vote Republican. The choice is yours. But anyway, I think it says something that these Republican politicians, despite the fear of Trump, which they all feel, are publicly saying, yeah, this is a dead end. But perhaps James Comer and Jim Jordan are going to keep dragging it out as long as possible. I don't know, and I don't pretend to. But let me know what you think in the comments.